question's not on the application, so that would be an assumption that a committee member is making based on the application.
I'm hoping and assuming that, you know, this process, the evaluation criteria that hopefully we can, you know, move forward with is going to be something that's publicly available. People will know kind of what we're looking at and how important different things are so that they can tailor their application sort of to.
And it's a natural weeding out of projects that people are just going to kind of throw buckshot to see if they can get, oh, I'm sorry, to see if they can get something to stick, right?
Yeah.
I think that that's also really useful.
Which I mean, I think applicants, as Kendra was mentioning, like if they know what we're looking for, they'll do a better job in their applications, which will help us, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they both have the application and a score sheet in front of them, right?
Yep. For a little bit there, at least in my mind, and maybe in other committee members, we were headed down a track that maybe was going to generate a significant staff contribution to the process or whatever, and I think we've scaled that back a little bit. But it's obvious to me, this circling back to one of Jody's questions, is that I think even with the very simplified, straightforward scoring process here, the information in each of these categories sort of deserves a little bit of staff time to articulate, you know, okay, if it's a scenic vista, this parcel is, you know, what classification of road is it along, how far is it from the road, what's the traffic count, things like that. There's some, I can foresee, similar to applicants that submit for zoning clearance, for example, there might be a relatively, hopefully brief staff report, you know, that would summarize, okay, just based on our GIS, which we have access to, we've got someone dedicated to look at these parcels and kind of give us a little bit of information in each of these categories that then, you know, comes to us. The application and the staff report comes to us. This is what we found in our GIS. It doesn't tell us to do one thing or the other. It's just information that we can use to come up with our scores or something like that. And so maybe the staffing question is definitely an important one. It's come up a few times, I know, in our discussions, and we're trying to be sensitive to that.
Yeah, that's something that we would anticipate doing. That if an application came in, that county staff, we would produce a report that would summarize the current uses on the property, where it's located, potentially, depending on what the committee wants, even our interpretation of whether or not it would meet any of the criteria, kind of as listed, or at least to some extent.
Yeah.
Just try to provide as much information as we could to review to hopefully make your job easier.
Yeah, and I think we're hopefully just talking about data that's right at your fingertips, right? Like you can pull up and see where the wetland database says, hey, there's 5 acres of wetlands on this parcel. You know,
yeah,
that's
a lot of it would be
simple
pretty
enough.
easy, where you just could show a map.
Yes.
And just let the community know, like, oh, here's all the wetlands, here's the floodplain.
Yep.
This has currently been farmed for this amount of
Yep.
time, as far as we can tell, or.
According to UDOT, the traffic counts on the highway that's adjacent is this.
Yeah,
And then I'd like to do something that Dave wants to do, go out and look at the piece of property.
Sure. Yeah, that should, I definitely agree that should be part of the process, right?
Jody, did you have another question? You look.
Well,
like you
I'm
do.
just kind of trying to envision a deal from beginning to end, and there's a number of sizable gaps and big black holes that deals could fall in through. You know, I try and envision a landowner coming in, and
I think we as a county are anticipating or hoping that the landowner would be taking a lot of the responsibilities onto them as they present it, and that's, you know, and part of the questionnaire.
I think we're going to have to put them in touch with some people that can help them go through that process, because if this is really, really rigorous and it is anyway, I didn't know it's gonna be, but if we want to preserve some of this stuff that we wanna preserve, Claire, that you've talked about, they've got to feel it's possible.
Right.
And cause if they don't, then, our job can't be to make life hell to get through the
Yeah, we gotta find that
process.
sweet spot of having them
Like,
make
we're doing,
sure.
we're checking all the boxes, but we're not like being
Too onerous. and
bureaucratic
Yeah.
to
But
a T.
the way it's set up now, there's some really big adverse selection. If I was to look at this and say, there's no way, it's just not worth my time. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not Dave here that understands all these little intricacies.
And to some degree, it favors people with a lot of money.
It does. And I think my point is you're just getting a lot of adverse selection of where people just say, no, it's not worth my time. And I feel like from a council, we've been given the direction that they're going to have to bear that burden. Nobody else can. We don't have staff. We don't have time. We don't have the professional support, short of sending them to an outside third party group.
And I think that's okay. I mean, we're providing a funding source. People are coming to us asking for money, and we want them to leverage that money. Like, we don't want to make it more difficult for them necessarily, but we're not going to take the lead on projects and, take on the burden that maybe some of these other nonprofit organizations would take on with a particular project. I mean, I think.
But Chris, can we be early in the process and say, we like your project, we would recommend it to the
Sure.
council, you can go, and if the council likes it, you can go, so that NRCS knows that they have someone participating.
Yeah.
And that Bear River Land Conservancy they're like, okay, we're gonna push this one along because we have at least someone in the mix that will do it.
I think
that's something that we can play as a positive role rather
Right.
than life is.
Okay, let's run with that thought for a second. So rather than us trying to get into a lot of these other things, is we would recommend that to the county as a potential funding source. And they would have a wink, wink, nod, nod from the county saying, you get your ducks in a row, we are interested in this project.
They can they could.
Before they
a conditional
ever
check.
spend their $100,000 or get other commitments. And maybe that's a better direction for us to go than to say, well, let's see, if they've got Lee Ray McAllister funds lined up or NRCS funds lined up, then we'll take a look at you.
No, I don't think we'll say that, but I am quite certain we will see a variety of projects come in. Some that'll have their ducks in a row, others that won't, and I think we'll.
Stages of the process.
I think so. So that's what I would expect, and so we do, in a sense, need to be nimble in that way and being able to respond to what we're gonna see. They're not gonna all be polished projects, but they still may be very worthy projects. I also don't think that every project that's gonna come and apply for funding is gonna happen regardless of our recommendation or not. I mean, if they don't get funding from us, doesn't mean it won't happen. And if we approve them, doesn't mean it's gonna go through the whole process and come to a fruition. I think there are a lot of projects that come for conservation easement funding that just don't happen. There's a large percentage that probably just don't happen. Would you agree, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, you're kind of backwards in a ways. I'm sorry, but somebody comes here and wants a project. He says, I really want to do this. And the first thing is, he agrees that he wants to do it. Then he has to ask all of his siblings and everybody else that it's okay with that. Then he has to come through and then he has to go through a process. First thing you're going to ask him to is you have to pay for an appraisal. And you're going to have to do some things first before you get any farther than this. And then when that appraisal comes through, he's going to come and look at it and say, this isn't worth my time. Or I'm a really good steward, and I say, okay, I'll be okay with that. Do you know Boyd Schiss in Nibley? He had a 25-acre process, or parcel in Nibley. And he came to us and says, I want to save my property. I just don't want to, I mean, there's houses coming from everywhere. He said, I want to save that. I want to be able to keep my pasture and just save that. We went through a process, probably took 5+ years, maybe farther than that. We went through everything. Maybe we had 2 appraisals had to go through because it took so long to get through the process. And then some things had to be put in place to pay for all the things. You know, you had to get a title search, had to do all these things first before somebody say, yeah, let's keep going with this. And then you come to the NRCS and you get ag money and everything else, and you gotta go down that lane. And so while you're doing this, these guys expire and you gotta start all over again. But the first thing is that people have to say, I really wanna do this, period. And then they gotta come and say, when they see the appraisal, is it worth it for me to do it? I mean, Boyd decided that I wanna do this. And he said, the only thing I wanna do is I wanna spend some money and make this pasture really nice, period. So he came in and went through appraisal and everything else, and he decided to hardly use any of that money. He paid for a lot less for the conservation easement. I mean, in the middle of Nibley, where everybody's going crazy, he went in there for less than $200,000 for 25 acres. Because that's what he wanted to do.
Sold off his conservation.
Yeah, to sell the conservation easement. He came in and said, this is all I want. I think when he first came in, it was 150. So we kind of had to talk to him a little bit. We looked at the appraisal and say, he was so far away what that money, that appraisal was worth in all of the development around it. But he said, I don't care. This is what I want to do. And he did that. And he didn't get any money. All he wanted to do was fix his fences and make sure his pasture was flat. That's all he wanted to do. And he did that for 8 to 10 years. We took forever to do that. And he just stayed there. In fact, he died 3 or 4 months ago. And the last thing he wanted to do when he died was to make sure his easement was done. And it just got done. After all that, right after he died, his family said, we want to do this because of our dad. And they did it. And he did it for nothing. But what it took to get it there took forever. And for us, I mean, the first part is somebody has to say, we really want to do this, and go through that process. You know, this thing you're talking about with Sherwood, you're going to be so crazy with what goes on there, and you're not even going to have to do with it. But it'll be nuts with all the landowners and everything, and the titles, and all this stuff that has to be done to even get this done.
So just a reminder, we're in an open session.
And we were done. And we approved that.
Yes, so right now the meeting is public. And so everything that's said here is
Okay? I'm
public.
talking about appraisals or conservation easements, what it takes to do it. So now we're gonna come to us and say, we really like to do, we wanna do this. And you've got your list, everything, hey, we think this is great by, you know, your scores and everything else like that. And you first gotta look at the property, and then you got to ask the person, do you really wanna do this? And then when they say, yeah, we really wanna do this, and then you gotta start back and go back to a land conservancy and start the whole process again. So the money that you're gonna use to expand is pretty significant, what it's gonna take to do it, even do it. So, I mean, if you wanna do it, put out a list of people that wanna do this and have them come up and show everything. And I can tell you the first one that's gonna come there, he's gonna come here and say, yeah, but he's gonna want so much money that we're out of the ballpark. Because he thinks, you know, he lives with a lot of subdivisions around him and he wants a lot of money because there's subdivisions around him. And we're not gonna be able to do that. And we're gonna say, hey, this is great, this is a great place. We're gonna think that in our data. So, first thing, we have to figure out who wants to do it. So, Get somebody in here, sit down and look at the property and say, we think this is great. Go through your data and everything, I think this is great. And then you gotta start this process before you go any farther.
Yeah, but all we're doing is saying, our only thing that we have to do there is say, yeah, this is a project we'd support, and off they go with Bear River Land Conservancy or
Exactly.
Utah Open Lands or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think we gotta decide, what does our process look like?
Then you have to approve how much you're gonna put into the deal.
Yeah, and I think we're also saying, provided that you're able to put this together, so we're gonna have a lot of probably dependent obligations that
Yeah.
have an expiration deadline. to them or
Conditions.
something. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think where I was trying to go with this is saying, we need to go and get it in front of the county for a conditional recommendation,
Yes.
like within a couple of weeks of getting the application. Then they can go back and try and do what Dave's talking about.
And we probably won't see them for 2 years.
Yeah, that's,
You won't. You won't.
but I think we need to have a very rapid path to get that wink, wink, nod, nod, yeah, we like it if it's reasonably priced, yada, yada, yada.
Dave, is that kind of what you have in mind?
And
I think if you just go see the property and just say, this is great, and this is why we really like it, that's your nod, in my opinion. We really want to do this. And then you've got to walk somebody through the process and find out all the things that aren't going to work. But all you have to do is say, yeah, I really want to do this. And then you got to figure out if you're going to have any money for it, because it's going to take you so long to get it there.
And what I'm saying is, I'd like to have the council give that nod as well,
yeah, we pass it through to them if we
Yeah.
like it.
because they're ultimately the final approval. We can only make recommendations. We don't have that approval authority.
Right,
But-
right.
But, you know, if we recommend it, the county says conditionally, if this, and this, and you can get it done within this time frame, all these little nuances, then it gives them some hope to go forward. But I can't, in good faith, say, go out and spend $100,000, and then I hope the county likes it.
Yeah, and Jody, I think we'd say, yes, yes, we like it on these, and this is the amount conditioned on this, and pass it to the council to go back and do a little more work, because we don't think you're quite ready, because Dave sees these bullet holes through it, and we send them back. Or, I think there's a third one and say, we want to keep your application, we want to kind of compare it to a few others, because we're not sure where this one falls.
That's kind of hard to do.
I think we can say, we have the ability to say that, though.
Well, I think there's a time frame that we need to be moving these along through. I don't think you can say, well, we're gonna package these unless you wanna set an annual deadline,
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
but that's the only way you can really do that.
These deals if we set
Yeah.
a deadline.
So how do you do that without saying, well, there's a drop dead date, everybody has to have it in for this pool of money?
But someone does that. There's a process where,
Sure.
the state, they were just, the money with, to do
Leader
Utah
and
Lake, they were talking
McAllister.
about like that, going and being, you know, that we're setting this aside because we may approve it, but we're not approving it right now.
Well, I think, that's what I'm saying, even the
Leader and
county,
McAllister, you don't get past but we'll consider it next year.
but even if we recommend it and the county says, yes, this looks like a potential, until we get all the facts in, that's still a big question mark if.
Yeah.
And so but I think we need to be transparent and say, these are the concerns we have, but we're recommending it anyhow. You know, maybe it's a small parcel, or maybe it's tucked around, it's a quarter mile off the main road, or we like it, but this is a concern. These are the concerns, and then the people can make their own decisions whether or not to invest or not in getting it prepared.
Okay, I'm gonna see if we can make some progress here in our last 10 or so minutes that we have. we had some good input from committee members over the last couple of weeks. Eric had sent out an email, mentioned that he and I had got together based on the feedback from the committee at our last meeting and tried to hopefully simplify the 2 evaluation score sheets that we've been moving along through this process as they evolve. Yeah, let's just talk about those for a second. I mean, we've got an application. We've voted on the 2 applications. I think our intent is to try to follow up with 2 evaluation score sheets that we can use as we're evaluating applications.
What 2 applications do we have?
The trails application and
In
the.
the
Oh, you're
open
talking-
space.
No, the applications that come before.
Yes, the forms, yeah. Yep, so yeah.
We've already.
I'm hoping that, you know, we can come to a consensus that, you know, although maybe not perfect, this is a good start. We're willing to start with this and see what needs to change as we start looking at applications. But I'm just hoping that we can get approval of these evaluation score sheets and present that to the council, get their feedback, hopefully their blessing, and we can get this process rolling as soon as possible. So what did folks think about what Eric had sent out, these sort of simplified sheets? Were we able to capture most of the feedback that was given before?
My input is that I'm quite pleased with it. It's simple. I'm even good with the scoring. I feel like we could go back and forth for another 4 or 5 meetings and go back and forth when it comes to a few points here or there. This is, in my mind, it's very close. I would love to just, you know, there's nothing to say that we can't change our evaluation criteria, right?
Yeah.
If we feel like in 6 months we've received applications, maybe we decide as a group that some should have scored higher or lower based on our point system, and then we decide to change it down the road. But I'm ready to move forward.
Can I make a recommendation? And I talked with Eric a little earlier. I would be okay in supporting both of these if we could put the caveat that these are non-binding, that because we think we've captured everything, but what happens if we haven't?
Yeah.
And, you know, this is for ranking, for comparing, but it's non-binding, and we may choose to recommend with a high score or without a high score.
Yeah.
If we could put a caveat like that, I think you'd get my vote.
Yeah, I think it deserves that kind of caveat, the way we're doing this. We're not following like a highly regimented system where we've figured out exactly how it's going to score. Maybe more of the process I was thinking we were headed towards. This is more simplified, so it allows, I think, a fair amount of discretion and that sort of thing, and we shouldn't be held to, you know, responsible for discretionary decisions.
But if we could make some little caveat on the top there, I'm good.
Do we need to say specifically that the score criteria and point system is subject to change and review, so we don't have a landowner that comes to us and says, hold on, this has changed from before? Just make it clear that it's, that we can change it if we see fit. And we need to make sure that the council is good with that.
I think that little, we used to call it squirrel language. That in or out, but, you know, maybe there's something about it is, you know, because we don't even talk about the price here.
Right. That's right.
So if somebody comes in and says, I want 13 million,
It could score 100 points and
and we're not gonna recommend it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the kind of outliers that could just totally throw it off.
This is, yeah, that's a good point. This is scoring the project outside of the value of the project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Good point.
That's right.
I'm in.
Do we want to draft some quick language, or do we want to just take? how
I
does
would
that take
offer
Or it'd be
that,
on minutes.
can I follow up with the committee? Let's just agree that we want that caveat
Yeah.
on here, and that I can work with staff and or the attorneys on maybe what's the best language or something like that. I would be willing to do that, if that would be helpful.
I like that.
Subject to change and subject to budget considerations and
Absolutely.
whatever else.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to accept these, subject to non-binding language inserted to be approved at the next meeting.
I second that.
So the only thing we're approving at the next meeting is that non-binding language.
Okay.
Have a
I
second?
second that.
Yeah. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I was just gonna throw out there really quickly, if we're keeping this introductory language at the top, it's a little confusing.
It needs to have the word member in there for
Yes, and then
I've
scores,
got that circled.
Okay.
Claire pointed that out.
and then scores are averaged for overall committee score, because otherwise it looks like we have multiple committees doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah, something along those
Let's,
lines.
just,
Yeah, it should say each advisory committee member
Members.
scores.
And scores are then averaged for an overall committee score.
Scores, let's clean that up.
yeah. We'll incorporate those, changes to this whole intro section. Okay. Anything else? Any other discussion? Thank you, Kendra. Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we will work with staff on some of this intro language, and with the intent that at the next meeting, we can approve that language. I do want to, before we go, I do want to talk a little bit about Claire's email.
We can
and
hold that over to the next one, just fine. with
It's,
me.
okay. So our next meeting is scheduled for December 18th.
Work for everybody?
It doesn't work for me.
I'm out of town that day as well. But we'll have staff here that can support.
We talked about having 2 early meetings because we didn't know that we would get this done. We could either celebrate and take it, or I think earlier in the month is better if we need a second meeting in the month of December.
Is that the meeting where we have Christmas dinner as part of this?
As part of it, that's paid for by the county.
Something like that.
Lucky. Is the 11th a possibility? It seemed like there was a conflict, Stephen, I want to say, with the 11th for some reason, but I may be making that up.
I know of. I would have to double check to make sure the room's available, but I don't think I have anything.
I would be able to make the 11th. What about others?
I'm okay.
Either one.
That works.
Kendra? Dave? Does the 11th work for you?
1 week.
Yeah, so that's a week from today.
Yeah, I can make that.
Okay, so
Not
can
the
we,
12th.
you're going to check
Yeah,
and make
I'll double
sure.
check the room's available, but we should be able to meet the 11th. And if we really want to meet, we don't necessarily have to meet in this room. We have other options as well. It's not like we normally have a big crowd.
Right. Totally up to you. Certainly, if this room is not available, we can meet somewhere else whenever.
Out in the back.
I'll double check to make sure.
Well, I love that idea. So just real quick, Claire, I just wanted to say I appreciate your email. I didn't have a chance to chime in before the meeting and include everybody, but I really love the idea of identifying potential projects within gateway areas, I think is a great idea. It's part of maybe that next step of implementation or more proactive role from the county or the committee to reach out to find if there's willing landowners in some of these areas who may not hear about the project or the program otherwise. What do others think about that idea?
I think that for the people who voted on this to get what they were voting on, it's gonna take the landowners at least being invited to the process for that to happen.
How do you've got to basically invite, it almost needs to be a property tax stuffer so that you're not,
Well, for what I was,
I know, but I'm just saying,
yeah,
how do you say you're in and you're not? We're going to approach you, but not you. Because everybody
there's
thinks their property is special.
Yeah, well, everybody can apply.
But that's what I'm saying.
But they won't.
But if we start approaching one, you gotta approach all.
I guess I don't see a problem with saying we want to focus on gateways and be proactive in approaching landowners.
We would
In the
have to
gateway
make it
areas.
fair, though, and say within a half a mile, we'd have to quantify gateway,
I think we would literally define what we think is a gateway
then that's fine with me.
and then you approach every landowner in that.
within that
And there's
area.
not that many for most of the gateway, for most of the immediate gateways. I know there's the whole other discussion about vistas, but
Sure.
yeah.
Why don't we just put in an open space application and see what happens?
Well, we're gonna do that for sure.
That'll happen regardless, right?
Yeah, and this is kind of more of a question of, does it make sense for the committee and or county to be a little proactive on some of these projects? It's worth a discussion,
I know
in my
Summit
opinion.
County, they did do that. And it was the committee that identified what it was, like, these are some
Yeah,
certain ones that matched what they were going for. And interestingly, in Summit County, the eastern side had different objectives than the western side. And they were okay saying, what are your objectives?
I think the immediate question would be, if we want to open ourselves to this, would be to, if we want to duplicate, this map for the other gateways that we've identified, just to see how big the list is, what
Yeah.
properties are involved, that would be the first step.
yeah. I mean, the planner and me would love to
Yeah,
You know,
and maybe there'd
go
be
through
some
that
staff
effort
help
and
to do that.
process, yeah.
This is amateur help, but
No, but it's
this was the easiest one. by far.
it's an activity this committee is capable of taking on,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, then we know what we're talking about.
If we could get our application process open and
Yep.
and up and running, I like this idea of being a little proactive.
The thing I'd add in addition, if we may, to the agenda, Chris, for next time, is something that just shows the flow of the process that a landowner needs to go through, that we could give to Bear River Land Conservancy, a landowner, so they know step by step what to expect. And that we know, and that we're on the same page as the council on what we will do and when they will see a project. And I'd be willing to draft something for us to
Great.
for next time.
Yeah, that sounds great. So kind of just a flow diagram that, shows a process.
You won't be able to evaluate money or anything until after the land trust has already started. I mean, you wouldn't be able to put money to that.
No, this just like is, when we get an application, what do we do with the application? That's what this is. Has, we take the application, we review it with this score, we determine whether we're sending, sending it to the council with a approval or whatever, and then council decides yay or nay, and then it's held conditionally or whatever.
Could we get, maybe you two to draft it?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying,
I'm not sure what all the steps are.
yeah. I mean, I think we've talked about them here, I just think we're easier to go through the council and everybody else, because we can kind of, we've talked through this over and over, right? But sometimes someone else doesn't know what that looks like.
I would agree. I think visualizing the process, because I've actually jotted that note down at the beginning of our discussion that we should try to visualize what that process is and map it out, because as we've talked about, there could be a little bit nuanced, and maybe establishing what our standard will be will probably be a good idea.
Just to communicate it so we can see if we're on the same page.
Yep.
Yeah, amongst ourselves and with potential applicants.
Yeah.
That would be pretty helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of the point. Are we on the same page as each other, or are we on the same page as the council?
Okay, so for our next meeting, which is tentatively scheduled for a week from today, the 11th, we're going to review final edits for the evaluation criteria forms, the language at the top, and we're going to discuss a little bit more about Claire's recommendations for gateway identification, and we'll take a look at Eric's draft flow chart for the process and
Oh, I guess, yeah,
chime
that's
in on
1
that.
week, huh?
Yeah, that's only a week, Eric.
Okay.
And you volunteered yourself, so.
He doesn't have anything else to do.
No.
I'd say if you have some time this week or the next day or two, we can talk and see what I can do to help you out.
Okay. Yeah, okay, great.
Anything else, Stephen, that you can think of?
The only other thing is, we just need to adopt a tentative schedule for next year that we publish. We can modify that as the year goes on. Are we wanting to continue to meet twice a month, or do we feel like now that we get some of these bigger steps done that we can move that to typically once a month and then hold special meetings if needed? Or I just want to put together a draft schedule for this committee that we can look at next meeting.
My default would be to keep the 2 monthly twice a month schedule, and we can always scale back when we don't need both meetings.
We could be
Do
close to
others
that,
have
but
thoughts?
I'd rather
or-
go to once a month.
Okay,
Just,
I think we've this was the big thing. We wanted to get something to the council so we could
Yes.
accept applications.
okay. So prefer once a month then?
Once,
Okay, all right, once a month.
Mondays, 3:30 still work? Do you have a preference for which Monday, first, second, third, fourth?
One with the least amount of power.
Yeah.
Look at your,
holidays.
look at your calendar on the first Monday, because a lot of your holidays.
Yeah.
like July.
I'll take a look at the calendar and I'll just come up with a proposal and, like I said, the agenda or our schedule can be amended as needed.
Second Monday might be the best based on holidays. You got some on the first, some on the second, and then you get President and, those are on the third, aren't they? President and Martin Luther Day.
I was gonna say first and third are just a week before second, fourth council meetings, week and a day. But the holidays is a good point.
I'm just wondering about the second one. I think is the cleanest.
Okay. I'll take a look at the calendar and
Okay.
if there's any conflicts, I'll note them.
Okay,
And then the only other thing with that is all your terms expire in a couple weeks. I've already talked to the executive office about reappointment. If there's any of you who, for whatever reason, do not want to consider being on here for another year, please just reach out to me just so I can let the executive know that he'll have to find somebody else.
okay. Anything else, committee members? Great, this is a very productive meeting, I thought. So appreciate your time and helpful input and critique.
move to adjourn.
We'll stand adjourned.